No. Pitch a rack tomorrow night. We got something new.
Now you can do anything with eyebrow?
In the golden age of the circus, the freak show was a spectacle like no other, a place where the curious and the strange were celebrated. We're going to take you back in time to introduce you to 20 circus freaks that actually existed. From the bearded lady to the human cannonball, these performers captivated audiences with their unique talents and unusual appearances. But who were they really? And what were their stories? Prepare to be amazed. Ella Harper. Ella Harper was born in Hendersonville, Tennessee, shortly after the Civil War, with an unusual disease that caused her legs to bend backwards, which turned her into a spectacle. She preferred walking on all fours rather than two, and this, combined with America's disgusting love with sideshow freaks, was enough to make her a circus attraction. Known as the Camel Girl, she drew thousands of stares. W.H. Harris, an ambitious showman, was anxious to have the most diverse roster of freaks possible, and upon hearing of Harper, offered her a hefty payment to sign with him. Ella Harper earned $200 a week as a featured attraction in Harris's nickel plate circus, which is roughly $5,000 today. This enabled her to find a home, while also pursuing a profitable career. Her career, on the other hand, frequently humiliated her. Aside from the obnoxious term camel girl, Harper was also shoved on stage with a real camel, and paying viewers were encouraged to marvel at the similarities. Harper was adamant about quitting, and ultimately, after a year's worth of weekly $200 payments, she did. Ella Harper's post-circus activities are unknown, but it is thought that she pursued education and returned to her native home immediately after quitting the freak show circuit. Tragic events seemed to follow her. When father died in a house fire in 1890, and Harper's brother Willie died roughly 5 years later. The Siamese Twins. Chun and In were born in Siam, now Thailand, in 1811, with a 4-inch band of flesh connecting them at the chest. Chang and Eng, as they became known in the West, left Siam as teenagers to pursue a career displaying their physical abnormality. The brothers quickly became objects of fascination, and their personal lives became a source of speculation. For more than a decade, the Siamese Twins performed in front of royalty, elite medical specialists, and public audiences throughout Europe and the Americas. By the 1830s, Chang and Eng had become household names, so well known that future conjoined twins would be dubbed Siamese Twins. For centuries, they have served as inspiration for poems, plays, novels, and biographies. They are relevant in current discussions of the 19th century South, race, popular culture, Asian studies, and disability studies as Asian immigrants to the southern United States, enslavers, showmen, and human curiosities. Priscilla Lur. Throughout her lengthy life, Priscilla Lur was known by many different names. Originally labeled the Hairy Little Girl, she was later dubbed the Monkey Girl, but those close to her will most likely remember her as Priscilla Bahano, Emmett, the alligator-skinned man's beloved wife. Priscilla's parents flew to New York City in search of answers from American doctors, where they stayed for 7 months until Priscilla's father came up with the concept of profitably exhibiting his daughter. Priscilla's father was not a profiteer. He simply saw an opportunity to take advantage of the predicament that had been foisted upon his daughter by nature. However, his inadequate grasp of English and business made promoting Priscilla problematic, so he sought help from showman Carl. L. Lur. Lur was offended that the public referred to Priscilla as a monkey girl, and he angrily retaliated against anyone who called her a freak. But the title, Monkey Girl, persisted, and Lur caved and began openly pairing Priscilla with a trained monkey named Josephine. However, because the two attractions were juxtaposed, he may have had the final laugh. Priscilla would sweetly and enthusiastically greet visitors to her exhibit. Priscilla passed away in her sleep in February 2001. Schlitzie Surtees. Schlitzie was a prominent freak show performer who appeared in almost every major circus of the 20th century. He was born with a condition known as microcephaly in 1901. This disorder results in a small brain, skull, and head, as well as a body that is undeveloped. Schlitzie, whose real name could have been Simon Metz, was raised in foster homes before joining the circus. He could only communicate in short sentences and phrases since he had the mental capacity of a 3 or 4-year-old. But he also had to deal with jeering audiences calling him a freak, cretin, and moron. He received a big break in 1932 when he was cast in the picture Freaks. Though the film was critically derided, it momentarily elevated him to stardom. However, his brief celebrity status could not save him from the brutal reality of circus life. Even though chimp trainer George Surtees took him under his wing and cared for him like a son, Surtees died soon after. Frances O'Connor. Frances O'Connor, who was born without arms, learned to eat, drink, write, and sew exclusively with her feet, all by herself. She signed on with the Ringling Brothers at the age of 15 while living in Sheridan, with her mother as her manager. While the Ringling Brothers Circus was the largest, O'Connor got her start in the spotlight in Wyoming, first with Barnes Circus and later with the Sells Floto and Cole Brothers Circuses, where she was touted as the living Venus de Milo. O'Connor's act consisted primarily of her doing activities that audiences took for granted, such as drinking wine or beer, eating a steak, or writing a letter. If you were lucky, you may capture her bracing and aiming a gun with her feet while pulling the trigger with her toes. And of course, she'd light a cigarette and take a few puffs. Frances Bell O'Connor eventually retired, choosing not to marry, assuming she was too old to do so. She died in Long Beach, California in 1982 at 67. Martin Joe Lorello. Martin Joe Lorello, also known as the man with the revolving head, the human owl, and Bobby, the boy with the revolving head, was born in Nuremberg, Germany in May 1885. He was born with a crooked spine that allowed him to tilt his head 180 degrees. When he turned his head, his spine formed the shape of a question mark. In 1921, he immigrated to the United States from Germany and began performing with sideshows such as Ripley's Believe It or Not, Ringling Brothers, and Barnum and Bailey. He trained dogs to do gymnastics in addition to rotating his head. Lorello couldn't breathe when he turned his head around, but he could drink. He had performed at numerous of Robert Ripley's auditoriums during the 1930s and died at the age of 70 of a heart attack and was cremated. Sarah Hobolt. Sarah Hobolt is an outstanding worldwide circus and physical theater performer who specializes in aerials, acrobatics, and hula hoops. She competed in swimming at the 2000 Sydney Paralympic Games. She boldly refers to herself as a natural-born freak, a term developed in the 1930s to characterize disabled sideshow circus performers. Hobolt was born with the uncommon Hallermann-Streiff disease, which alters her bone structure and causes her to stand at 144 centimeters. She is also legally blind. However, she prefers to focus on her strengths and the skills she brings to the stage rather than the peculiarities of her disease. While she enjoys performing on stage, Hobolt is equally passionate about working behind the scenes, where she works in arts administration in New South Wales. She is also an outspoken supporter of disability rights and art history. She enjoys associating with the sideshow community in part because she intends to combat misconceptions and negative connotations linked with the term freak and the sideshow industry. Laloo. Laloo Rampersad, a native of Uvanin, Oud, was born with a parasitic twin erupting from his chest. The brother, who was clothed as a sister at times, had arms, legs, and a working penis. All it required was its own head. Despite being a Muslim, he was marketed as the happy, healthy Hindu in sideshows. An English entrepreneur spotted him in 1888 and took him back to Europe to display. Laloo arrived in the United States in 1891 and traveled with most of the major circus sideshows, including Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. In 1905, he was on his way to Mexico with the Norris and Roe Circus when he died in a train catastrophe. Maximo and Bartola. Maximo and Bartola made their debut in 1848. In the spirit of shameless advertising, their handler's hoax not only prolonged their long careers, but also the careers of 2 generations to come. Maximo and Bartola were born microcephalic and originally from the St. Salvador town of Decorah. Later, Maximo and Bartola were sold to an American promoter named Morris. Morris concocted an incredible story to introduce the children to the American public. America was enthralled by the display of ethnological marvels at the time. Because of recent discoveries and publications, interest in the Mayan civilization was at an all-time high. Morris produced a 48-page brochure in conjunction with his exhibition of Maximo and Bartola to profit on the public's newfound appetite. The intricate, real narrative surrounding Maximo and Bartola's discovery in an Aztec temple in a vanished city was told in Life of the Living Aztec Children. According to the brochure, Maximo and Bartola were discovered squatting on altars and were members of a sacred race long worshipped by the city's people. Morris clothed the duo in Aztec-style attire to support this assertion. Both wore outfits with Aztec suns embroidered on the front, and their hair was left to grow bushy. Their little size, along with their proportionately small skulls, gave them a highly unique appearance. But would the general people think they belonged to a long-lost race? Rather than dismissing these outlandish statements, the general populace believed the pitch. Maximo and Bartola were seen as the final survivors of an old civilization by those who saw them. They are said to have been on display until 1901, under the supervision of numerous successive managers, and the facts of their eventual demise remain unknown. Our thumbnail is creepy to say the least, with the picture on the left showing a man in some sort of weird costume pushing what looks like a farming apparatus, and the picture on the left is of a man with a homely face, or perhaps a scary mask who doesn't look too friendly. Johnny Eeek. Eeek was not born cut off at the waist, but he did have small, non-functioning legs which he tied close to his body using a customized apparatus. Born with a fraternal sibling named Robert, who was completely formed and resembled him, the two performed a notorious trick in Raja Raboid's magic show in 1937. Raboid would pretend to see Robert in half, and Johnny would emerge from the box with his legs severed. During this act, spectators were known to faint or escape the theater. Johnny had joined a sideshow as a single O in 1923, with this brother accompanying him to keep an eye on him. He was known as the Half Man and worked for Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey, Ripley's Believe It or Not, and the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. In addition to Freaks, he played Goonie Bird in 3 Tarzan films. He then returned to his birthplace of Baltimore, where he shared a house with his brother Robert. In a nearby amusement park, the two guys ran a penny arcade and a children's train ride. In his later years, he focused on his hobbies of screen painting and putting on plays for the neighborhood kids. Millie and Christine. Millie and Christine McCoy were conjoined twins born on July 11, 1851, in Columbus County, North Carolina, to slave parents Jacob and Monimia, who belonged to blacksmith Jabez McKay. The McCoy twins attracted attention and scrutiny from the minute they were born. The sisters were joined at the lower spine and shared one pelvis, but each sister had her own 2 limbs and legs. In adulthood, they referred to themselves as Millie Christine, a single person. The twins' owner allegedly sold them for $1,000 to a showman interested in displaying them in freak show circuses. They finally ended up in the possession of another individual, Joseph Pearson Smith, who was thought to be a wealthy trader. The girls were known as Millie and Christine Smith while in Smith's care. Their owner hired them out to other touring shows. During the same year, a showman responsible with displaying the sisters abducted them from Smith and transported them to a private exhibition where they were discreetly presented to scientific groups and inspected by physicians. After nearly 3 years away from their legal owner, the twins were sold to another showman who displayed them in a museum in Philadelphia. They were quickly relocated to England. Millie and Christine were no longer slaves after the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, but they chose to stay with the Smiths and continue to perform at the circus as a singing pair rather than sideshow attractions. Prince Randan. Prince Randan could roll cigarettes, light them, and even shave his face with just his mouth. He was known as the Snake Man, the Human Torso, and the Human Caterpillar. Whatever he went by, when the curtain rose and the spotlight landed on Prince Randan, there was no doubt that the crowd was taken aback by what they saw. Prince Randan, who was only 3 feet tall, was a startling sight. His arms were nothing more than nubs that stopped at his shoulders, and his legs were nearly non-existent. He looked more like a caterpillar than a man in his one-piece red and white striped costume. P.T. Barnum, his sideshow employer, took advantage of this. Throughout his sideshow career, he wiggled around the stage and performed tricks with only his mouth. Randan died of a heart attack on December 19, 1934, barely hours after giving his final performance after more than 40 years of performing. Jonathan Rbass, the ossified man. Jonathan Rbass belonged to the ossified men sub-branch of displayed peoples. He had rheumatism from boyhood, but he managed to work on the family farm in upstate New York for most of his life until he was 57 years old, when his body froze up completely and cataracts took his eyesight. With most of his family members who had cared for him already deceased, he decided to showcase himself at dime museums and sideshows. People would travel from across the country to see his frozen, emaciated form, which was normally propped up and tied to a board. He weighed only 75 pounds due to his all-liquid diet. He endured 5 years of this, apparently with remarkably good cheer, until he passed away of pneumonia in 1892. Edward Mordrake. Edward Mordrake was a youthful, bright, and attractive English aristocrat who was also a gifted pianist. With all his wonderful blessings, however, came a horrible curse. Mordrake had a terrible second face on the back of his skull, in addition to his lovely normal face. The second face was described as lovely as a dream and hideous as the devil. This odd countenance possessed intelligence of a malignant sort. When Mordrake sobbed, the other face would smile and sneer. Mordrake was plagued by his devil twin, who kept him awake at night, whispering such things as they only speak of in hell. The young aristocrat was eventually driven insane and committed himself at the age of 23, leaving behind a message requesting that the demonic face be removed after his death. The news of the man with two faces quickly traveled across America. The public demanded more information on Mordrake, and even medical specialists approached the story without reservation. The Mordrake account was published in the book Anomalies and Curiosities of Medicine, written by American doctors. Although the doctors were respectable ophthalmologists with excellent practices, they were also rather gullible in this one instance, because as it turned out, Edward Mordrake's account was a hoax. Even the most outlandish stories have a grain of truth in them. The medical disease known as craniofacial duplication can cause an embryo's facial characteristics to be duplicated because of aberrant protein expression. People are still surprised and duped by Edward Mordrake's story today. Even though the man never existed, the story has become an urban legend that will certainly continue to raise eyebrows for years to come. Aloysia Wagner. Aloysia Wagner, better known by her stage name Violeta, went to New York from Germany with her stepbrother and worked as a vocalist in sideshows such as Coney Island's Dreamland and the Ringling Bros in Barnum and Bailey Circus. She moved herself by hopping from place to place on the bottom of her torso and was able to manipulate objects with her mouth enough to comb her own hair, dress herself, thread a needle, and sew. Violeta was married and wore her wedding band around her neck on a gold necklace. Violeta's overwhelming appeal and beauty, as well as the complexities of her quite different manner of presentation, are detailed in a superb review of her show written in 1940. She is only a beautiful torso, with no arms or legs, not even the rudiments of limbs. Except for the absence of the typical limbs, there is no hint of deformity about the sleek trunk, which would stand up to any beauty queen or national Venus. In fact, her customary billing, without exaggeration, is beautiful armless and legless Venus. Violeta died in 1940. General Tom Thum. In 1838, Charles Sherwood Stratton was born. When he was 6 months old, he stopped growing. In 1847, he began to grow again, albeit slowly. Stratton had grown to a height of 2 feet 8.5 inches by his 18th birthday. At the age of 5, he began touring with P.T. Barnum as General Tom Thum, garnering fame and money that subsequently permitted him a sumptuous lifestyle and business relationship with Barnum. Tom Thum died of a stroke in 1883 at the age of 45, 6 months after narrowly escaping, written in 1940, at Milwaukee's Newhall House, which killed 71 people. He was 3.35 feet tall and weighed 71 pounds at his peak. Jack Earl. Jack Earl, who was born in 1906, stood 6 feet tall before the age of 10. He was almost 7 feet tall by the age of 13. His real mature height is unknown, however, estimates range from 7 feet 7 inches to 8 feet 6 inches. He was so tall because he suffered from a disorder known as acromegalic gigantism. And, while his height could be useful in some situations, it could also be harmful in others. Earl was a Hollywood actor who appeared in films such as Hansel and Gretel and Jack and the Beanstalk before suffering serious injuries in a fall from a scaffolding and retired from the industry. The Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey Circus freaked out soon after his accident. The show visited town with Jim Tarver as their current touring giant. Earl was significantly taller than Tarver, and sensing an opportunity, Ringling Brothers offered Earl a one-year contract with the circus. Earl had previously stated that he would never participate in a freak show, but he needed a job, so he agreed to sign the contract reluctantly. On his first day, however, he was put at ease when a dwarf performer named Harry Dahl stated that there were more freaks in the crowd than in the sideshow. His Ringling Brothers career began with the 2 feet 2 inches tall Major Mite. He'd be on the road for the next 14 years with the sideshow, often posing alongside extremely short men or average-sized men to further emphasize his height. After retiring, Earl went on to become a traveling salesman for the Roma Wine Company. He died of kidney failure in 1952 at the age of 46. George and Willie Muse. George and Willie Muse, born black and albino, were kidnapped from their sharecropping neighborhood in 1899. George was only 6 years old, and Willie was just 9 years old when they were kidnapped from their home in Roanoke, Virginia, and a freak hunter named James Herman Candy Shelton was about to push them into the circus. George and Willie were ordered to perform in freak shows as the Men from Mars and lots of other degrading nicknames, after being pushed to grow out their hair into dreadlocks and highlight their characteristics. Despite their popularity, the brothers were only given minimal needs in exchange, and they weren't allowed to keep their earnings, even though their white employers profited handsomely from their humiliation. Worse, George and Willie Muse were told their mother was deceased, even though she was still alive, to dissuade them from thinking about their family members or attempting to flee the circus. Meanwhile, their mother, Harriet Muse, worked feverishly to free them. She faced an uphill battle in doing so, especially given the time's very racist culture and the fact that many authorities did not take her complaints about the circus seriously. She miraculously freed them by attending a performance herself in 1927. The brothers, who were in their mid-30s at the time, quickly spotted their mother in the crowd. They were soon reunited and given permission to return home to their families. They eventually signed a new contract with better terms and were able to send money back to their families. In the mid-1950s, the brothers retired and spent their senior years telling stories about their traumatic experiences. George Muse died of heart failure in 1972, and Willie lived until 2001, when he died at the age of 108. Julia Pastrana. Julia Pastrana took the stage at Broadway's Gothic Hall in Manhattan in December 1854. Pastrana, dressed in crimson, captivated the audience by singing and dancing. Children paid 15 cents and adults paid a quarter to view the Baboon Lady. George C.D. Odell, the show's theater chronicler, described Pastrana as a wonderful, semi-human being and a cross between a woman and an orangutan. He saw that she, or it, was intelligent, had a lovely voice, and could speak 3 languages. Julia Pastrana, billed as the missing link between ape and man, was examined by various doctors who issued certificates, which were posted wherever Pastrana went on tour, claiming that she was not a woman at all, but rather a new species of half-human, half-ape hybrid. Pastrana's death did not liberate her from public scrutiny. Her body was displayed all throughout Europe for decades before it was eventually stored in Norway. Pastrana's narrative, on the other hand, was never forgotten. Frank Lentini, the three-legged man. Francesco Lentini was born in Rossellino, Italy, on May 18, 1881, into a family of 12 other children, with a third full-sized leg extending from the right side of his body. He was relocated to the United States at the age of 8, where he later appeared as the Great Lentini in several circus and carnival sideshows, including P.T. Barnum, Ringling Brothers, and Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show. When deformities and disfigurements began to be considered as objects of public attention and enjoyment during English summer fairs, entertainment acts such as the Great Lentini became popular. Despite the unconventionality of his job, Frank Lentini's life is a historic immigrant success tale. Most people go through life fearful of having a traumatic encounter, but freaks were born traumatized, and they've already passed their life test. According to Diane Arbus, they are aristocrats. It's sad to see how these circus promoters profited off these poor disabled people. On the other hand, many of these people were unable to work, and the circus provided them with an excellent salary. Which one was your favorite? Why don't you let us know in the comments below? Well, that's it for now. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and let us know in the comments what you think. Check out our other videos and subscribe to be part of the fun. Click on the notification icon so you can see our new videos as soon as they're uploaded. Thanks for watching and see you next time.